It seems like with every single console launch, we run into the same issues. Short supply, crazy demand, scalpers everywhere, eBay prices at $2,000 a system. Why do we always end up in this mess? Well, we're here to talk about why console launches are always such a headache on another exciting episode of A Cast of the Past, where you can check out a brand new episode each and every Sunday. Joining me today to talk about this is Keith Hamilton from London, Ontario.
Hi, that's me.
So Keith, have you ever bought a console at launch during all the craziness?
I have done it once, and I will never do it again. I stood in line for a Wii when it first came out. I did not get that Wii. In fact, I waited for 3 days until I was able to find... I went home, I was broken and beaten, and just kept calling every day and looking for stock. And then all of a sudden, I found an EB Games near me that had a couple of Wiis, so I gunned down there, got my Wii, played Twilight Princess, never played the Wii again. So that was my that was
Really?
what all that work was worth. No, I played a couple of games on the Wii. It was definitely a system that collected a lot of dust for me. Like, I enjoyed Twilight Princess. I played a lot of Super Smash Bros. On it, and then got way too much time investment out of like the Dragon Ball Budokai Tenkaichi game that came, the one where you had to like do a Kamehameha motion to do a Kamehameha.
Oh, really?
I
never played the motion version.
Hell out of that game. Oh, it was so much fun.
Yeah, so I actually don't think I've ever gotten a console right at launch, so I've never dealt with these insane headaches. I usually just wait it out. And generally, that seems like the best thing to do because...
Yeah, let's be real here. That's the way to go.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
It really is, because if you think about it, most of the time, what games are there even to play? You generally end up with a paperweight for about 2 years until the library really starts to expand. And that seems to be, the case with a lot of systems. I mean, the Nintendo 64 literally launched with 2 games to play, Mario 64 and Pilot Wings. And
now, to be fair, one of those is a game that I would still sit down and play today. So you can't knock it too hard. There was enough. There was 2, but there was enough.
Don't get me wrong. Great game, but you know what I mean? After you get your fill of that game for the time being, there wasn't really much left to offer for quite some time. So today, we definitely want to dig into this issue because we always get here. And part of that, I mean, there is a business and financial side to why we're always at this point. And I think some of the economic side to this, and definitely Keith, feel free to jump in, is when you think about it, okay, just before this podcast recording, I was thinking to myself, why is it that we're always here? Why don't they have this huge backlog of consoles ready to go? And then when the launch date hits, they have, I mean, I don't expect them to have enough supply to meet the demand, but you would think that they would have more than they have. But at the end of the day, looking into it, there are some reasons for that. First of all, these consoles are very expensive to make. And
extremely.
Yeah, they're extremely expensive to make, and they're usually taking a loss on these consoles most of the time, just based on, where we are, like, technology-wise. Obviously, as the years progress, they find more efficient ways and parts get a little bit cheaper, so they start making more money on the systems. But because they're expensive to make and they do take time to make, it doesn't make sense for them to have these massive amounts of factories and hire all these additional people just to handle a release. And then once demand is met, what are you going to do with all those factories? What are you going to do with all those people?
Exactly. It's just bad press if you close it all down.
It's bad press. It's a bad idea because the cost of, the facility and the hiring and all of that, it just doesn't make business sense to build up this huge supply unless you literally delay a year or something like that, which also would be bad because then if you're Xbox and you do this, well, PlayStation's probably going to just release the PS5 and all of a sudden you're a year behind. And we saw...
And that looks so much worse.
It definitely looks worse, and you can see what a year can do. Not saying that the manufacturing side applies here, but saying, when the Xbox 360 came out before the PS3, it very much dominated the generation until the very end in terms of 360 versus PS3. We know Wii was its own story in that generation, and just because it hit the casual
it barely
market,
counts.
Yeah. But as far as 360 versus PS3, 360 won for about like 80% of that generation, and it wasn't until the very end that PS3 finally caught up. Most of the time,
absolutely.
Yeah, most of the time that catch up doesn't happen. So,
and that was an instance where they decided to rush it out the door, even though it wasn't like really ready to go yet. Because that's why we ran into things like the red ring of death as consumers, because it wasn't a product that was fully where it needed to be. It got there eventually around the time that the PS3 came out, even a little later. But the fact that it was out there long before the PS3 really gave it that head start. So it's a situation where, yes, it sucked, and yes, consoles constantly bricked, but they were still selling consoles. So did they really care? Probably not as much as you think they did, because that was still good business at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think there's a lot of people that today, when we're looking at the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, that these problems of supply, again, we know the business side, why they don't just have one for everybody right out of the gate, just because it doesn't make, financial sense.
And plus, I think a big aspect of that as well is that resources are finite. Yeah. These things that are going into these systems, especially these days with this new series of consoles, they're very similar as far as like video cards and graphics chips and motherboards and stuff like that. All of those there's a finite amount of them, right? It's not just this endless supply of computer chips that they can go into. So every time that there's a PlayStation being built or a computer being built, well, that's not an Xbox. And it goes almost in it's almost like a triangle where you could say the same thing about each one of those. So that probably leads to a lot of the issues as far as demand goes. And I feel like that, not knowing, not being in the business, I feel like that could be something that could be said about almost every single generation of consoles as a reason why they just never got it right.
Yeah, and not only that, so we already know, look at articles about the 360 when it launched, super hard to find. Look at it for the Nintendo Wii, almost impossible to find in 2006.
The PS2, it was a nightmare.
It was the same thing with all these consoles. Now we have PS5, Xbox Series X, so we already know, there's already a history that this is an issue. But now we have the pandemic exacerbating all of that. So it's even worse than it normally is, because that is also slowing down all the supply chains and all the manufacturing, just creating this crazy, unique situation where it's just nearly impossible unless you are one of those sneakerhead people that have bots ready to go and get and snake all the PS5s.
Monsters, if you're one of those monsters.
Using the bots, I mean, it's tough. It's a similar situation with the Pokemon cards. You got to beat the bots, but obviously it's less expensive items we're talking about here. But with the PlayStation 5, it's something I've not attempted to get, or the Xbox Series X. I do want them eventually, but I'm not in a rush. So I don't know. Have you played that game at all to try and to get either of these yet?
No, I haven't, because I'm in the same boat of where I've just gonna let things cool, because I've had a history of this, wanting the Switch but not being able to find it. I didn't get one until far after it came out. Same thing with the PS4 and the Xbox 360. I am perfectly okay with waiting for one of those, just from having gone through it a couple times. But if you're someone out there that's doing it, I totally understand it, because it's almost kind of unfair to the consumer, in my opinion, because on one side, you have the production issues that we've been talking about, but these companies still, on the other side of their mouths, the marketing side, are like, this is the new thing that you need. You want to be on the cutting edge. You want to play all the good games, all the cool games. Well, you need this new box. But we can't get it for you. Sorry about that. So I guess you'll just have to wait or pay like an extra $1,000 if you want the box. You know what I mean? So it's very consumer unfriendly that way, and it's a problem, and it's a big bummer that it just keeps constantly happening.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, with anything in short supply, scalpers are going to come in. They're going to try and sweep up all the the consoles and make money off of it. And that is just they're literally people who that is their job, is they are scalpers. And
it's insane that there's a society that can sustain that.
Yeah, there's always something that's the hot product, right? As soon as you're able to just go into the store and get a PS5 whenever you want, they're already moving on to the next thing. Right now, it's all the collectible stuff and all the video game stuff, like computer parts too, graphics cards, things like that. That's the stuff that they're after, because those are the things that during the pandemic, these were, people were doing indoor hobbies. So naturally, video games, collectibles, anything like that is what skyrocketed people building a new PC. Or even
before that, when like Bitcoin mining was a thing, and it just shot up the price of video cards because people were buying like pallets of video cards so they can mine stupid Bitcoins, right? So you're already going into this with a finite amount of resources already low as far as graphic processing, and then just made it significantly worse when the pandemic came along.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, my words of advice is patience in this situation, which I sometimes myself don't even practice what I preach when it comes to things like Pokemon cards, where I paid a little bit more just so that I could get it. But for a system, I think patience is something I actually have practiced. I did that with the Switch, and I did that with the PlayStation 3.
Yeah, you did that with the PS3 recently, where you waited the entire generation.
The PS4. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the PS4.
PS4,
Sorry.
Yeah, I waited the entire generation just because there wasn't any particular games that like compelled me. Generally, it's like, oh man, they announced Grand Theft Auto 4. I got to get a PS3. They announced Skyward Sword. I had to get a Wii. I didn't get the Wii until literally Skyward Sword, which was the tail end of the life cycle of that console.
So you have a history of this more than anything.
I do, at least when it comes to video game consoles, I do practice what I preach. And that is wait. And I'm not saying wait till the end of the life cycle like I have for a couple of systems, but ask the question, what are you going to play? What are you going to play with these consoles? Because right now it's like PS5, it's like, okay, you beat Demon Souls, now what? It's a legitimate question.
Especially when you consider the price of these boxes plus the price of these games, right?
Yeah, which are now $70.
Yeah, in Canada, it's $100 after tax to pick up one of these games. And the fact that you can go out, let's say a year from the time of this conversation, and pick up these new games for like $20. There's really, unless you need to, or unless your job is to check out these things, like there's not really that much incentive, in my opinion.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing, and we are also available on podcast feeds. So search the name, click on the Sword and Stone, and enjoy a brand new episode every single Sunday.